Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 382 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week. Kicking things off with the owner of MTG Goldfish, Richard. How are you this fine Monday, Richard?
Hey Seth, doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing surprisingly well. I had a lot of fun watching Magic this weekend. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I watched a ton of new Capenna Championships, and it was actually really entertaining. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get to that in a minute. We got another awesome co-hosted, Kreb. Kreb, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing all right myself. Mostly just also enjoying a little bit of Standard and whatnot. So.
Yeah, that's actually one of our topics for today. We're going to be talking about the new Capenna Championships, which happened this weekend. We got to watch some of it. There was also some OP news. There's some, oh boy, Wizards OP. Some pros are not happy about how the tournament went, how Worlds qualifiers went. So we want to get into that a little bit. And then, of course, we are right in the middle of Commander Legends Battle for Baldur Gate spoiler season. We got a ton of stuff to talk about, new mechanics. So we're going to talk about all that as well before answering your fish mail questions. So that's the overview of the cast for today. Before we jump into it, a reminder that our show today is brought to you by Card Conduit. And we've been telling you about Card Conduit, a great way to sell your Magic collection, and their curated shipment service that'll let you sell your valuable cards with a reduced service fee for a while now. And as long as your cards have a retail value of at least $2, you can send in as many as you want and still just pay a 5% service fee. And as with all of Card Conduit services, you don't gotta sort your cards, you don't gotta grade your cards, you get to skip over all those hassles and just safely package everything up and ship it out. And you'll even get a detailed report with the results, so you can check out Card Conduit's curated shipment option as a way to buy list cards with fast processing, optimized prices, and a low service fee of just 5%. And you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/mtggoldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic. Let's start with the tournament stuff, and then we'll talk spoilers for the rest of the cast. So this weekend was the new Capenna Championship, which I guess is kind of roughly a Pro Tour equivalent. We're going to have traditional Pro Tours back in not too distant future, but these have been the equivalent of a Pro Tour for the last year or two. Richard, what actually happened at this tournament? Let's talk a little bit about the decks, and then we'll talk about all the other stuff that came along with it.
All right. So I did not watch the tournament. I did follow it because I was posting the deck lists and whatnot. And there were some saucy deck lists here. So the format was split, standard, historic. And the standard part was especially interesting. So Jan Merkel won the whole event with a Jeskai Hinata deck. And then if you look at the top 8, we have a really good mixture of decks. We have 3 Esper midrange, a Jeskai Storm, a Jeskai Hinata, a Naya midrange, Grixis Vampire, and then 2 Jund midranges. So midrange seems key, but lots of different colors, lots of different strategies, and even within the same colors, some pretty saucy stuff like Storm and Hinata and Standard. Like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, this Standard was so much fun to watch. So I actually watched quite a bit this weekend, a little bit on and off while I was doing other stuff, but I caught as much as I could, and Standard was just super entertaining. I skipped over the historic rounds. I don't really care about watching, 35% of people bash each other with Arclay Phoenixes. I've seen that before, but Standard was incredibly entertaining. There were so many mid-range decks, and that led to a lot of just really interactive back and forth games. I think there was a game in the top 8. It was Mike Sigrist versus Hasamachi Yoshigo, and it was one of the best games of Magic I've seen in a long time. Sadly, the match ended up ending with Siggy timing out in game 3, but the game 2 in that was just like haymaker after haymaker. Both players were empty-handed, both were close to dying, and just people top decking each other back and forth, and it looked like one would win and then someone would top deck and it'd swing back the other way. It was the most fun I've had watching Standard in years and years, honestly. It was just absolutely a joy to watch these Standard matches. So I was blown away at how good Standard was. Like, that was my biggest takeaway. Did you get to see any of it, Krim?
I tuned in for a few rounds here and there. And yeah, like, this is kind of like a little bit just what I've kind of felt like about Standard since Kamigawa came out. And it's that it just has gotten better and better. Even within like the 3 colors, there's multiple archetypes and decks, different builds, and it's just a lot of fun to see the standard play out right now. This is a pretty solid standard. And I don't know if this is just because of how miserable the past standard was, but like since once Eldraine hit, it's just been downhill, right? So, but I think Kamigawa kind of brought it back. Capenna added a lot of fun stuff to the standard, and we're finally just seeing good old fair mid-range haymaker like back and forth, right? So I really like this standard right now. I myself have been having the time of my life, just kind of like playing it and watching it. So
yeah, and going into the deck list a bit more, it gets spicy outside the top 8 too. You see like Naya Rune decks, mill decks, tempo decks. Basically, because mana is so good and because I guess we're so dirtily mid-rangey, like anything goes, right? Like you can do whatever you want. So this is like the first Magic event I regret not watching in a long time. Just like seeing the deck list and seeing the diversity and the different strategies, I kind of regret. Not really. I spent the weekend watching Midsummer Invitational, League of Legends. It was awesome too. So I don't regret, but you know, if I had more time, I would definitely want to watch Magic here because it's I don't know what happened. Like Standard looks so good, and I don't know why no one is talking about it. I don't know if it's because we're in perpetual spoiler season, everything is Commander content, or we just given up on organized play. But it would have been nice if this event had more hype.
Yeah, it really deserved more hype because the decks were cool. The gameplay was really good. There were even some great storylines. By far my favorite, and I was rooting so hard for Yoshigo, Hasamachi Yoshigo. Apparently the story of this is he only started playing Magic 2 years ago. And then he built this Naya mid-range deck as a homebrew for fun. And he was like, I'm going to go to my LGS and play a tournament, because I want to jam this deck. This deck looks really fun. He ended up winning the tournament, and he didn't realize until after the fact when people started congratulating him that it was a qualifier for the new Capenna Championship. So he shows up and he was like, yeah, I'm just here by accident. Like, I'm just having fun. And you could see him on camera through the every match he was on camera. He just looked like he was having a blast. He was like responding to people's top decks and like just loving it, just enjoying it and playing the deck. And he made it all the way through to, I think, like the semis. The setup of these top 8s is really weird, but he got knocked down to the lower bracket and made it like 1 match away, I think, from the lower finals. So he went super far in the tournament, and it's just such a great story. Like that's everyone's dream. You make your homebrew, you go to play at your LGS, and next thing you know, you're at the top 8 of the equivalent of a pro tour and just loving every minute of it. So that story like totally made the tournament for me. But really, we got to see a lot of cool things. We got to see a ton of Streets of New Capenna. A lot of the decks are these 3-color decks. We see Ginny Phase and we see Evelyn. I was surprised at Vampires being a real deck. That's not something I'd really seen on the ladder. So we got to see Vampires being good. Of course, Esper is still there with Rafine's doing its thing. It's a really good standard, and it does deserve to be talked about more, and it does deserve to be played more because Standard's in the best place it's been in many years, I think, right now. So take advantage of it if you can.
I have a question, Seth. What were the stream numbers looking like?
Oh, bad, of course. And we'll see if this comes back once we get paper pro tours. I still think there's a disconnect. Honestly, they've been doing these set championships for 2 years now, and it wasn't until the Kamigawa Championships where I tweeted something about it, and someone actually let me know that it was roughly the equivalent of pro tours. I thought they were just like, I don't know, the top 1200 on Arena qualifies for it or something. I didn't realize it was actually supposed to be a big deal. So I'm really hopeful that the Pro Tour name coming back is going to help there, and at least people will know that it's a tournament that matters, because I don't think new Capenna Championship actually expresses that to people. Plus Wizards, I'm sure, could promote it more and promote it better. But the stream numbers, I don't think they hit 10K, at least any time when I was watching, unless they managed to spike it, when I wasn't looking. But they were running in the like 7 to 9K range, which is good for a Magic stream these days. Like, that's more than an individual streamer is going to draw. But compared to Pro Tours getting, 20, 30, the best ones, 40 to 50,000, not great numbers. Speaking of not great, while the gameplay of the tournament was really excellent and the storylines were great, there was still some drama, quite a bit of drama. Richard, what was the drama that kind of came out of this tournament and the qualifiers for Worlds, which were kind of the other big storyline of this tournament, is this was the last tournament for people to qualify for Worlds.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be pro Magic without some spicy drama. But basically, Paulo took to Twitter and kind of just roasted WotC on their format. So the TLDR is like this, right? So they split the allocations to Worlds into 2 buckets, and players from one bucket, that missed out from that bucket performed better than players that got in on the other bucket. So that was a bit weird, right? Like someone with like more points did not make it because they were just in a different grouping. And then the little cherry on top was a little tidbit where some match results where there was like some hiccup in the tournament where there was some miscommunication between judges and players. And then both players of that match were awarded a bye. So they both won that match. And it turns out that those people were ahead of other people that didn't make it to Worlds, and like that was actually consequential. And then there's some drama about like what actually went down and whatnot. But the end result was like the Wizards tournament format left a little to be desired, and then you had basically one of the greatest Magic players of all time kind of just like in disdain about missing Worlds, and like not missing Worlds. Like missing Worlds is normal, right? Like this happens, but missing Worlds due to a format that's kind of set up that doesn't really make any sense. So that's the drama. And a lot of players are affected by this, right? Like LSV missed Worlds, I think, Paulo. I actually don't know what happened because the numbers changed slightly after the event versus before the event, but a bunch of players felt like they deserved to make it, but they did not due to the format structure.
And there were also just some normal arena issues. Someone crashed in the top 8 and ended up timing out, which was kind of disappointing. There was also a time on day 1 where 20 people disconnected at the same time, and Wizards said it's not on our end, and everyone was like, how could 20 people disconnect at the same time if independently? What are the odds of that? And they all lost as a result of it. So there's definitely some technological issues, the technology on top of it. The most disappointing part is I think that LSV, apparently, if either one of the people in the match that both people ended up winning, if either one of them had lost, like if it just ended like a normal match, from what I understand, LSV would have made Worlds on tiebreakers, but he ended up missing because of both of those players winning that match and getting more match points. So I could see why people would be frustrated with that. Like, it seems like a pretty sketchy system. I guess for me, my main hope is, I don't know, the OP announcement was really good. Paper Pro Tours were really well received. People seem hyped about that. Limited's going to be returning to Pro Tours. So maybe this fixes itself as we move to this new organized play system, starting the end of this year. So I'm holding out hope for that. But yeah, as good as the gameplay was, a lot of people seem to come away from the tournament with some bad feelings about the overall state of organized play and Worlds and whatnot.
I mean, I'd be pretty tilted if that's how I didn't make, top 8 or anything like that, or Worlds. So I think it's a little justified. That's a little upsetting. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really make any, like, how can 2 players walk away from a match with a win? Like, like, I understand there was a hiccup, but why didn't they just like force a rematch or something? You know what I mean? Like, yes, it will suck if you're winning, but like, why would you just both get a win? Like, that just throws the rest of the tournament and the season into disarray. So that's super awkward. And,
so just to clarify that a little bit, that match didn't happen during this tournament. It happened during like the last tournament.
Yeah.
So I think they were hoping that it would just not end up mattering as far as world standards, but it really did.
But we don't care about recording the results correctly. It won't matter anyways.
Apparently it was an administration error, essentially, where apparently the story is there was a bug and there was some disagreement over whether when they restarted the match, they were going to count the time that people had spent during the first game before the bug happened. And one player was told, yes, the clocks are going to start from where they left off, essentially. So they played towards their opponent timing out, but the administrator didn't tell the other player that the clocks were going to stay at their same place. And they thought the clock was resetting, so they didn't worry about timing out. So the match ended. One player thought they had won. The other player thought their opponent had time out, so they had won. And then the administrators were like, oh, this was our bad, guys. Like, we didn't we didn't pass the information along to both players, so we're just going to give you both a win. Which is just a ridiculous, like, what kind of solution is that? Like, it does not... As much as I'm excited about the future of OP and Huey being in charge and the announcement about Paper Pro Tours, stuff like that definitely doesn't give you confidence in the whole system. Like, if that's the solution.
I mean, what doesn't give you confidence is two of the biggest names in your game, the history of your game, right? Like, not getting by on technicalities and then being disgruntled, and I don't know where this leads, right? Like maybe Paulo promotes another game, right? Like is this the last straw? I don't know, but this is not good, right? Like we're talking about star power and building personalities and all. Like this is not what you want, right? So very strange, very strange. And then there was another rub that Paulo threw in there about Hall of Fame invites, and apparently you don't get them if you attempt to qualify for the event. So you can use one at your discretion, but if you attempt to qualify for it, you're not allowed to use it for that event. And he's just like, what the heck? Like, well, I don't want this system, right? So yeah, a lot of grievances. It wouldn't be Worlds without another controversy. Remember the Jerry T thing? So yeah, here we are.
That is very weird, because it seems like you'd want Hall of Fame members to be playing Magic. That seems like a win, even if the game's not streamed. Like, people are just gonna like seeing Paulo or whatever when they go to play some random qualifier. So I feel like for Wizards, you would want to encourage people to play. So the idea that you would kind of punish people for trying to qualify for an event by not letting them use their Hall of Fame invite that just doesn't make any sense to me. What's the upside of that from WotC's perspective? I don't really see it. Anyway, any other thoughts on the tournament, any of the OP stuff before we get to Commander Legends 2? All right, so we're in the middle of spoiler season. We're about halfway through. Spoilers go all through this week, and then we get pre-cons at the beginning of next week. So maybe not even halfway through spoiler season. We have a ton of info, though. We got so many cards, new mechanics. So, Richard, why don't you guide us through these mechanics and cards?
All right. We got a ton of Baldur's Gate this weekend, or this week.
Oh, did we?
So remember, this is a Commander draft. So this is legal in Commander. This is legal in Legacy backwards. So we have a couple new mechanics. And first up, it's the background mechanic. And essentially, you will have commanders that have the text choose a background. So they can be your commander. And then what backgrounds are basically an enchantment you can have in the command zone. So think of it as a partner that contributes to your color identity, and you can mix and match. So for example, for one commander, you can choose a certain background to build a Gruul deck, and then another one to build a Golgari deck or something like that. So for examples, we have Karlach, Fury of Avernus, 4 in a red, 5/4, legendary creature, Tiefling Barbarian. When you attack, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap all attacking creatures. They gain first strike until end of turn. After this phase, there's additional combat. And then it has the choose your background. And then you may pair it with, say, Raised by Giants, which is 5 in a green, legendary enchantment background. Commander creatures you own have base power and toughness 10/10 and are giants in addition to their other types. So if you choose these two cards, you basically have a Gruul deck and these two cards in your command zone.
What do y'all think of this mechanic? I'm really curious. So obviously it seems really cool for limited. I like that aspect of it. And this is a draftable set, so that's a concern. But do you think this is going to be a popular mechanic in actual full-on Commander? To me, it really nails it flavor-wise, I think, from a D&D perspective, because you have, like, your commander's the character, and then you get to choose their backstory, essentially. So I think the flavor is really good. Power level, though, I'm actually kind of like, man, like it seems way worse than actual partners to me, because a lot of the backgrounds feel like they're pretty safe, and most of them, you gotta have your commander creature on the battlefield for them to do anything. So if you can't actually keep your creature commander going, then the other part of your partner pairing is kind of just a dead card in a huge percentage of the cases. So I don't know, I'm actually a little bit unenthused, I guess I would say, about this background mechanic. Wait, am I missing something? Is it more exciting than I think?
I feel like everything is super powered down. I don't know, maybe because, we've been used to like a lot higher power, and especially with Commander Legends attached to it, I thought this would be just, I don't know, the background seemed super safe. Like you had mentioned. If anything, they kind of feel underwhelming. Like I wouldn't, if it weren't for the flavor aspect, I probably wouldn't play these enchantments normally, right? I do love the idea though of Wilson the Bear being a demon, right? So like that is pretty hilarious. But outside of flavor, I don't know. I mean, I like the idea behind it, but the execution just feels like the cards are kind of weak.
I mean, I think like really you're like if you play Karlach, right? Whatever background you choose is just to add your second color, right? Like you're playing Karlach for the 5-mana 5/4 that gives you an extra combat, and then this extra card that gives you color access. And if you view it like that, I think they're fine, right? It's not the same as a partner, but I don't like the design because it's needlessly complicated and it kind of defeats the purpose of Commander. Like now you're just like putting random stuff in the command zone so you can just play whatever colors you want. And that's like the good old like Child of Alara play random pile, like whatever, right? Like I don't know, like we have so many legendaries. Why do we need these like modular legendary things? Like what is the point? So it's just super confusing, and I don't really like the design of it. Forget power level.
I think it's going to be just for this set though, right? Like any D&D set, because this really just feels like it's meant to be a build your own commander mechanic, right? Which makes sense with D&D. I think that makes a lot of sense with D&D.
I wonder how much of it's just limited. How much of it is the pressure to have a fun limited environment on top of making a fun commander set? Because I do think this will probably play really well in limited, and they want you to be able to have a whole bunch of these lower color or lower rarity, partners essentially. So you're going to make sure that no matter what you end up drafting, you're going to have commanders to lead your deck. Because I think that's a nightmare, is somehow someone drafts a deck and then doesn't have the legends to play enough cards and they can't actually build a deck. So I think that's part of what they're trying to do. But I think that the focus on limited maybe takes away from commander itself. So yeah, I don't know. I'm also just kind of meh on this mechanic. It seems complicated. It messes with the command zone, so it kind of takes a little bit away from the authenticity of Commander. Like, I already kind of didn't like the other mechanics they made to interact with the command zone, like Eminence or even Partner, I was kind of meh on. And this one takes it even a step further, where you're just throwing a random enchantment in there just for the sake of doing it. So, to me, it feels like a miss other than flavor.
I'm waiting for the third partner, like the triplet. Like they seem very intent with like messing with the command zone. So you can currently have 2 partners and a companion, but I think they're gonna add like a third partner any moment now. Like they seem pretty intent. Or maybe you add a sorcery here next. We have an enchantment, so we can be full Oathbreaker.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe a Planeswalker, throw one there too. So I don't know. This is like so this is like I need to sell cards. So I need to like jam stuff in to make it look unique and exciting, but you could have just like made commanders that were exciting, like to begin with, and then you can just avoid all of this. So
but flavor
that's one of my disappointments.
That doesn't work, right? Because with D&D, I think you want to build your own commander. How
about I build my own deck? That's like,
I mean
customization. Like I don't know.
That's fair. But like the background, I like it. I like it flavor wise. I think flavor wise, this is really cool. I don't play that much D&D, but I know the idea behind D&D and like what makes it like, fun. And this is kind of like mixing that in here. So I like it from that standpoint.
The only problem is if it's so powered down that no one actually plays it, then who gets the D&D flavor anyway? Like, if everyone just ignores this and no one builds background decks, is it really a win? I guess that would be my worry. Maybe they powered it down because Partner, the originals, were just so busted. Like, it's inherently strong to have 2 commanders when most people have 1 commander. So maybe they just felt the need that they had to go really safe with these to avoid having the original Partner problem again, where they just ended up being like kind of busted and like super CEDHE. So maybe they just played it super safe.
I think it definitely feels like part of that is in play here, right? After the first Commander Legends and the last batch of Partners, I think there was they definitely wanted to dial it back this time around. And even if we don't play it, right, I think this might. Is it possible? Is it just possible that this might be more so for the D&D crowd than the Magic crowd?
Maybe, but is the D&D crowd, the D&D crowd also has to be at least a little bit part of the Magic crowd because to play with the cards. So yeah. Although I was talking to Tomer about it and he was also kind of meh, I think. And this is like designed for him because he's like the biggest D&D fan I know. So I don't know. I don't even know if it hit the mark completely for D&D fans. At least let us know if you're watching this on YouTube or someplace you can comment. I'm really curious what the overall feeling is, especially from D&D fans. Is this something you're just like hyped for because the D&D flavor is so good, or is it more of a like, whatever, the power level is not that high, I'm gonna stick with my partners or my normal commanders or whatever?
All right, we have another mechanic, initiative. So initiative is basically Monarch for dungeons. So when you get initiative, you get to go into a dungeon, and then you can lose initiative when other people attack you. So White Plume Adventurer is a card with initiative. So 2 and a white 3/3 creature, orc, cleric at rare. When it enters the battlefield, you take initiative. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, untap a creature you control. If you've completed a dungeon, untap all creatures you control instead. And along with initiative, we have a new dungeon, the Undercity. And the way it works is if you take initiative from someone, you automatically enter the Undercity. So it's a new dungeon. It doesn't look like anything crazy, but you know there are lots of dungeons, so you need to take a look at him. Or there are a lot of rooms, so you need to take a look at the card. I'm not going to read all 50 lines of text here.
This is another mechanic that I love. Monarch. As far as I'm concerned, Monarch's the single best multiplayer mechanic they've ever made. So I'm excited about having another Monarch-like mechanic where it's going to force people to attack each other. Like, you can see it in Commander Clash. But I especially, and also Tomer, we will go way out of our way to try to hit the person with the crown to draw that extra card. And I think that this new mechanic's going to do something similar. Although it is a little weird and also confusing that we now have like initiative and venture into dungeons, and like initiative can only get you into the Undercity, but venturing into a dungeon can't get you in the Undercity, even though it's a dungeon. And the whole like atmosphere around this mechanic is really confusing to me because it's so similar to dungeons, but actually doesn't interact with dungeons in the way that might be intuitive to most people.
Wait, why can't you use this with the old cards?
So, like, if you play a venture into a dungeon card,
Undercity, you're not allowed.
My understanding is that you can only get into the Undercity with initiative cards. Once you're in the Undercity, if you play a venture into a dungeon card, it'll keep you progressing through the Undercity. And then your initiative cards only get you into the Undercity and can't get you into the dungeons from the old set, from AFR. Although, again, they'll keep moving you through the rooms if you're already in a dungeon because you can only be in one at once. So I don't know why they did it like that.
Not to power creep the old cards because now they have access.
I guess, yeah.
You spoke about Monarch, but the Undercity rooms are kind of underwhelming. I don't know if we're going on an all-out
Undercity, underwhelming. God, nice.
It's like search your library for basic land, put in your hand, put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature. Target player loses.
The last mode is nice.
The last mode's pretty good.
Yeah,
get a creature essentially from your top 10 and give it 3+1/+1 counters, and it gains hexproof until your next turn. Like, it maybe, I don't know. It's probably comparable, right?
You guys should hold it for 5 turns uninterrupted.
No, but you can keep stealing it back. So you hit the person and get it back and go through the next room and keep progressing through that way, I think.
Unless somebody hits it you,
yeah.
right?
So if they hit you, it's fine because you keep your progress, right? You just So you don't like go backwards. So as long as you get this thing 5 times, you're good to go. Yeah.
It plays a little weird. Like if you're playing initiative cards, you kind of got to have these Undercity cards for the whole table, right? Like, because they might not have them in your deck. And this seems kind of hard to track without actually having the token there to move through the rooms. So I don't know. We are getting a little more board gamey, as you mentioned when we were getting the cast going. Like now you got the Monarch going around and you got to have 4 of these Undercity tokens. And that's a lot going on. The table's getting a little bit cluttered, I think.
I mean, I look at this mechanic and I'm like, wow, cool mechanic. I'm like, oh, great, more crap I need to take. Like, I got to keep track of, right? Like, this is just needlessly complex. Like, why? Like, if I'm not playing a dungeon deck, why do I have to keep track of dungeons, right? It's like the stupid Celestis day-night thing. It's on your battlefield, even if you don't own a Celestis and the Celestis is gone. It's like, yeah, it's day, now it's night, now it's day. I'm like, I don't want to know this. I'm not playing this card. Like, leave that to the person playing the card, right? Like, oh.
Maybe that's the power of the mechanic. It forces your opponent to spend some of their, finite brain power tracking the Undercity. So you turn that to your advantage and get them why they can't focus as much because they're trying to keep track of a room they're going into.
So do we like the mechanic? Do you think it's good? Do we just like it because it makes a fun multiplayer environment, or do we actually think it's good?
I like the multiplayer part of it. The more multiplayer things that you can add into a game of Commander that isn't too distracting, I think is fine. I think this is a cool mechanic. I think most of the floors before the last one aren't that good, but I guess again it comes down to how good are the cards that this is attached to, right? Like the things that are taking us into the Undercity, the one that's giving us initiative. Because if this is just the cherry on top of initiative, then that's fine. Sure.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a fun multiplayer mechanic. That's how I'm looking at it. But from what we've seen so far, it doesn't come across as like a super strong mechanic. Maybe I'm a little biased because of how Power Down Dungeons ended up being in most cases. But so far, we've only seen like mostly random uncommons. We saw 1 rare, a bunch of uncommons. So maybe that'll change as we get the rest of spoilers. Maybe there's some crazy legend that works with initiative that'll make it more exciting. But for now, I'm just viewing it as like, I would throw an initiative card in my deck just because I like the Monarch and I think it leads to fun Commander games. So I don't think it's powerful, but I do think it'll be fun.
All right. Next up, I think this is the most exciting card for me. Gond Gate, unofficial translation. Land Gate. Gates you control enter the battlefield untapped. Tap to add a colorless. Tap to add 1 mana of any color that a gate you control could produce. And it's an uncommon.
So good. By far, my favorite part of this set is the new gate support. We also got a Baldur's Gate, which is Cabal coffers for gates. Adds a colorless, comes into play untapped, and then you tap it and pay 2 to make a mana for each gate you control. So I'm super excited about gate support. I love gates because I think they're one of the best ways to build a budget mana base. And I think that's definitely doubly true now, thanks to this new Commander Legend stuff. If you don't have access to fetches and shocks and like the expensive top tier mana base, cards like Gon's Gate and Baldur's Gate is going to make your gate super duper ultra budget cheap mana base be able to keep up with those expensive fetch land, shock land mana bases. And we're to the point now, there's supposed to be, I think, 10 gates they said in the set altogether, and we've seen 2 of them. But if they're anywhere close to this power level, I think the gates might just be the optimal way to build budget mana. Like this gets around all the drawbacks. There's tons of way to tutor out gates so you can find your Gon gates, and then all of a sudden all your other gates are great because they're coming to play untapped. And you get Maze's End as a finisher. I think the gate support is, for me, the most exciting part of the set so far.
I don't know. I mean, sure. I for a budget mana base, I think so. Yeah.
What if you just run like the 37 basic special? Like, this is great if you have God Gate on the battlefield. If you don't, all your lands enter the battlefield tapped.
Yeah, then you have all gates.
So I don't know. Is this actually the ultimate budget mana base? It's the most brain dead one. You don't even think, right? You're just like, okay, I'll just add all the guild gates, right? But can you muster up some percentage of basics and whatever the budget, the Innistrad rares or whatever, random standard cycle that never hit it big, like use one of those? Like, is that
choked estuaries and port towns.
Oh my god. But if you're not those, I'd play Gates pre-Commander Legends too before I play the Snarl cycle. Good god.
There's some probability those enter untapped without a God Gate, you know?
Yeah, I think those would enter untapped more than the Gone Gate because there's only one. Right.
I respect the Gates though, because I know where they stand. I just know they're coming into play tap. The Snarls, you never know. You never know what. It's like a psychological thing. They trick you into thinking they might be good and then just dash your hopes. Do you not think Gates are going to be the best way to build a budget mana base? Or are we not to that point? Because that's where I've been kind of leaning that, like, if you're playing budget, your lands are probably going to come into play untapped anyway. So you might as well have this Gone Gate, and maybe your lands don't come into play tapped, have Baldur's Gate, and you get your own budget Cabal coffers. Plus you get Maze's End as a way to tutor up the gates that you need. Or would you still play, like, I don't know, whatever other random cheap lands?
I don't know. It depends on the random cheap lands. Like I even like the Snow Duels from Kaldheim because they have the land type. But
you can't fetch them because
you're right.
Budget, right?
You're
I guess
right,
if you have a Farseek or something, you're good, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not green, you can't fetch them.
Well, I mean, if you're using guild gates and you're trying to fetch out a ton of guild gates, you're probably also using green, right? So I assume that Farseek will probably be somewhere in there, or could be in there. I don't know. There's like circuitous route or whatever, right?
Yeah. Like I think Krim's right. If you're playing green, you don't need the gates unless you're building a gate deck, right? Because you have the fetchable duels. But every other color, like maybe. But I feel like there's some way to finagle a working mana base because you really are reliant on Gone Gate. And how do you get the Gone Gate out, right? You need an expedition map. That's like turn 3. But in reality, that's turn 4 because all your lands enter the battlefield tapped, right? Like,
there's also that like 1 mana, like, isn't there like a 1 mana gate tutor like creature?
There are a bunch of ways. There's a 2 mana Gate Creeper Vine, a 2 mana
there we
gate
go.
tutor creature. There's also a tune with Ether for gates, but then you're in green.
Are you
so
playing
then you might
these
not need
cards
it, I
in
guess.
a non-gate deck though? Like,
No.
yeah. So,
No.
But we're talking about a generic budget mana base for gates, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you have to look at it. I mean, but it's certainly the most easy one. Like everyone has guild gates sitting around, so you just take them all, slap this thing in, call it a day. So I think there's an argument for that.
And I think also worth mentioning, it's probably more important for if you're like 4 or 5 colors. Like if you're just 2 colors, then you don't get that many Guildgate anyway. So I think this is especially going to be impactful for 4 or 5 color style budget decks, which are probably the decks that need the most help because 5 colors where your shocks and triomes and fetch lands, that's where they pay off the most because you're always going to have access to your colors. So I think this will at least help with like budget 5 color mana bases.
Savage lands. All right. Next up, we have Elminster. New legendary planeswalker that can be your commander. So 3 white and a blue, so 5 mana value, 5 starting loyalty, has a passive. Whenever you scry, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less to cast, where X is the number of cards looked at while scrying this way. +2, draw a card, then scry 2. -3, exile the top card of your library, create a number of 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying equal to that card's mana value.
I think this card's kind of doo-doo.
Ooh, I was thinking Crib might like this one. This is
this is not the good one. I don't know. I think like a majority of the set just feels, maybe it's just not like flashy as the other stuff, but this feels kind of boring and not that great. I mean, I like the minus, I guess. It's like it's kind of cool, but I don't know. I mean, it just seems okay.
So scrying's kind of a weird thing to care about. We don't have a ton of scry matters commanders. I think there's that one Igith or something, the one Sphinx from last Commander Legends that cares about it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of unique that it cares about scrying. I do kind of like this card as far as planeswalkers that can be your commander, just because of that -3. I feel like one of the problems with planeswalkers being your commanders is it's really easy to play them and then +2 to draw a card or whatever, and then just have it get killed and not really get much value out of it for 5 mana. But the -3 can potentially make a lot of blockers. So maybe you can actually keep your Elminster on the battlefield for a little bit. And it does kind of it's self-contained. The +2 draws a card and scries 2, and then the next instant or sorcery you cast is going to get a 2 mana discount, so maybe you can like chain together card draw spells or cast a Wrath on the cheap to keep your Elminster around. So as far as Planeswalkers that can be your commander goes, I feel like it's fine. I don't know. It's not really my style of commander, like a blue-white Drago, like Azorius style deck. That's not really my style, but for what it is, it seems okay.
I don't think it's like, or like as a commander, I don't think it's that great. I don't know. I'm not a fan of it as a commander.
I would not call it. It's like some like storm card or something. Like you're trying to take advantage of that scry, or like a super go wide. Like I think that -3 is actually really good. Like you can probably hit like a 7 or 8 drop quite easily in quotes. But that's like, 7 1/1s, 8 1/1s, right? And you have MDFC, Seagate Restoration, Ameria's, whatever, like as cards that people play that easily trigger this. You have all the cost reduction, like Vanquish the Horde, Hour Revelation, like all these cards are here that you can actually use and make a ton of like fairy dragons. So I think you would build around that -3 more than that, the scry, but I don't know.
I mean, maybe that's the way to do it. If you focus on the -3, it does work with the Scry plan, because Scry lets you set up the top of your deck. You're probably going to have Scroll Racks and Sensei's Divining Tops to do like Eureka shenanigans where you can set up the top of your deck and then flip into something huge and make a whole bunch of 1/1s. I can see that. And then worst case, like if this is 5 mana, make 10 1/1s or something, even if it dies somehow, like you're kind of fine with that. That's a fine deal for 5 mana. That's a lot of tokens. So maybe it actually is this weird Eureka control the top of your deck token style commander.
I look at it the other way, where I think it's going to be how much can you really get that value from the scrying. I think the minus is like kind of medium, because it's not like I get to cast the card, right? I don't get to get the card.
That's the most
exiled
efficient
forever.
scrying you can do. Like, so the idea is like you would scry and then cast like, I don't know, Blatant Thievery, Amanatu's Augury or something. So like, what's the best scrying ritual that like we have?
I mean, you could use, what's that? There's the blue one.
Is there a scry 4?
There's a scry 3 with addendum, right?
Yeah, there's a bunch of Scry 3s.
But do they cost 1 mana?
Oh no, there's a 4 mana creature, Cryptic Annelid, that's when an ETB Scry 1, then Scry 2, then Scry 3. So that's like +2 mana. But that's a 4 mana 1/4.
Yeah.
There's no 1 mana, like do something scry 3? I'm shocked.
There's the Starfish, the one that like I think you tap it. It's like 1 or 2 mana.
Okay.
And then you scry 1.
Here it is. Mystic Speculation, 1 mana sorcery, scry 3, buyback of 2.
Oh.
Got him.
That's so
wait, do you
much
just go
value.
infinite?
Huh?
Well, you can...
Oh, because you can't reduce the
only,
buyback. You can't reduce the buyback.
It's only reducing... Well, it reduces the buyback, but you can't reduce the blue mana. So you're going to run out of blue mana, I think. Because Elminster only reduces the generic part of the cost, not the blue part.
I see.
But even like a Preordain, 1 mana, scry 2, draw a card, like you're kind of turning that into a desperate ritual almost. Man, you just try to chain it together, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's I feel like where you're getting the value from, because again, I just don't know if that -3 is what I want, because it's I just wish I got to cast the spell or something like that. That'd be great, but I guess casting a spell plus like an X amount of 1/1 flying is a bit powerful, but
I mean they go together. You're supposed to somehow scry and ramp into like a giant spell, right? And then if you can't, then you just -3 to make some 1/1s. Unfortunately, Surveil doesn't count here, so
you probably want that
what about
giant spell though.
What about being like a Miracles style commander, Crib? Is this where you can do your Sensei's Divining Top shenanigans and play your Terminus and play like Legacy Miracles? Break out your counterbalances. Is this a good option for that?
No, I would just go Amanatu instead. Amanatu's 2 mana less, and I get the addition of black mana. And the minus ability is really good. The +1 allows you to stack your deck how you need, and of course you have a trolling alt. So, it just feels like Amanatu would be better if I wanted to play like kind of like this top style commander.
What if you wanted budget Gandalf?
That's the thing I wanted to ask.
Does that look like Red Gandalf to you? What's going on?
That's what I was gonna ask. Like, this looks just like Gandalf. I'm like, how are you gonna put this out? And then when is Universes Beyond come out for Lord of the Rings? Like next year or this year?
Maybe partnership terminated
next year.
They're like, we're suing you for.
God.
Apparently, we're not D&D fans, and I'm sure we're gonna get yelled at by D&D fans. But apparently, Elminster is like super iconic D&D character. This was a character that everyone was mad didn't show up in Adventures in Forgotten Realms. So apparently, it is like a really big deal in D&D world. I don't know D&D, but that's what everyone tells me at least.
All right, I googled it. The real Elminster does look like Gandalf. The question is, who came first and who's copying whom? All right. Next up, Tasha, the Witch Queen. 3 blue and a black, so 5 mana value. Can also be your commander like Elminster, 4 starting loyalty. Whenever you cast a spell you don't own, create a 3/3 black demon creature token. +1, draw a card for each opponent, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery from that player's graveyard and put a page counter on it. -3, you may cast a spell from among cards in exile with page counters on them without paying its mana cost.
This card now. Tasha has my allegiance here. This is a good Planeswalker here. This is what I'm talking about. Talking about like how, okay, well, you can Elminster minus, get some bodies, yada, yada. This, I just get the body no matter what, as long as I cast the spell from somewhere else. I mean, from exile or something or it's just a spell I don't own, right? But it also draws a card. It's also able to hate out some spells. Like it's like not like full on graveyard hate. Like this is what I'm cutting graveyard hate for, but it's still able to like hit our opponent's graveyards a little bit. And then the minus is, obviously up to you, right? Like how good are the spells in the yard? Because then you get to potentially cast it. And I like that a lot. This is a very good Planeswalker in Commander. A very powerful one, too.
Oh, interesting. I think Tasha's looks really fun to play in some sort of theft style deck. If you're like Ascend Triplets or whatever, Nihilor fan. If you like that style of play, like I think this is a really, really fun way to play it. I'm not sure about power level, though. I kind of think it's low powered because what I imagine happens with this card is, first off, you got to cast spells you don't own to make demons. So it's going to take some setup. You're going to have to like Gonti your opponent first or like have something going on if you want to make the token right away. But what I think happens with this card is you spend 5 mana, you cast it, you plus it, you draw a card, you exile stuff. And then your opponents kill it. And then the next turn, you got to spend 7 mana and -3 it. And you get to cast one of those spells for free, which kind of means you build a 12 mana Diluvian Primordial or something. Like it just seems like a really expensive way to cast one of the spells from your opponent's graveyard, unless you think it's going to survive. If it survives and you do all that for 5 mana, that's a pretty good deal. But how does that actually survive the turn if you cast that? An uptick.
I mean, I feel like the trade-off is that the power, like sure, maybe Elminster gets a few bodies so you can chump block, but the ability to cast a spell here, like her ability to like win a game or like take a game over, just totally reset a game is much higher, and like she feels way better than Elminster because she still draws me a card. Right at the very least,
really strong.
And,
like, so you can Wrath and cast Tasha, like that's the classic Planeswalker thing, but you can think of that -3 as an ultimate, right? Like you can get something
an ultimate
saucy, right? Like you can get like a big 10 mana spell or 7 mana spell or something with it, right? Like you can Eerie Ultimatum, you can whatever, Blatant Thievery with it. So even in the worst case where you play it and it dies, like what you do is you play it, right? You target a Wrath from one person, you target a finisher from another person, and you target a whatever. And then they murder Tasha. And now you have 7 mana like modal spell that can be a Wrath, a finisher, or whatever, anytime you want out of your command zone. So you can do that.
Okay.
You can just Wrath and play Tasha. Like, you can keep your Planeswalker alive, right? I think Planeswalker to ultimate is really hard, like multiple upticks to ultimate, but like 1+ followed by a minus, I don't think is that difficult. And then black has your staples to trigger Tasha, like Voidwalker, Gonti, things like that. So you can trigger
Hostage
Tasha.
Taker.
Hostage Taker, yeah, in these colors. So I think you can actually trigger the passive without actually using Tasha herself. So I actually think she's kind of cool and interesting.
Okay. I think it's definitely cool and interesting, and I think it'll make for a really fun deck, but I don't know. I'm still not really sold on it being like a strong commander. To me, it seems like a really fun commander, but I don't know if it's going to be strong. I'm not sold on strong yet.
Free spell.
I think
free spell. Costs you 7 mana, but it's free.
Kind of 12 mana if you have to play it twice, but it's free.
You drew a card off of it, they said. You drew a card
that's
that. Remember that.
That's true. After activating Magnifying Glass to draw a card for 6 mana, I should be thankful for this Tasha, actually. So okay, you got me. It does draw a card. It's good.
All right, next up, we have Archivist of Ogma, 1 and a white, 2/2 Halfling Cleric. Oh, Kitkin. Flash, whenever an opponent searches their library, you gain 1 life and draw a card.
Is this a staple?
no.
Is this a Esper Sentinel or something? I kind of lean towards, I mean, so it depends on your play group a little bit. If everyone's playing the gate mana base and you don't have a lot of green players, then this card does nothing. But if everyone's playing like tier mana bases and people play green at the same rate that they do overall in Commander, doesn't this just draw you like 3 or 4 cards typically like every game? And that's great for 2 mana.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I tweeted this out and I still agree with it. I think this card's not that good.
Ooh.
I think this card's like not that good. I think it's kind of
Grim.
like
what
medium.
if I took Spirited
at best.
Companion and made it a 2/2, gained a life and gave you a flash?
Okay, Spirited Companion is an enchantment, which has a way higher upside to me than this card does. Just because like this card, okay, I do not like this card because it still allows my opponents to search.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You're just salty that it's not literally opposition agent.
Honestly, like I okay, if it were opposition agent, but like my opponents drew a card and gained a life, I'd be fine. That's great. This card would be awesome.
But don't think of it as a hate card. I think people are misevaluating this card. It's not a hate card. It doesn't stop your opponent from doing anything. You're 1,000,000% right there. But it's white card draw. Like, I feel like this is gonna draw a high number of cards in your average Commander game, assuming you play it on turn 2.
Okay, so then we go from the point of view where, okay, let's say just card draw. Isn't there just better than just a vanilla 2/2?
In mono white?
It's just bigger Spirited Companion. I mean, you can't blink it, but you can get multiple. Like, the thing is, no one will play around this, right? Like, they can't even, like, save up the extra mana to pay for your trigger, right? They'll just be like, well, I'm not going to waste removal, so I'm just going to crack my fetches into this. And I think you're going to have the time of your life. I think you're going to draw a lot of cards. Like, would you hold fetches or, like, attempt to remove this thing? Like, no. Right? So I think this is like a 2 mana draw 3 or 4 or something like that, attached to a body with flash and some life gain. So I actually think it's really good.
I think this.
What do you think about Legacy?
Wait a minute.
Legacy. This is something people have been talking about. Like, you just run out on Legacy. Everyone's playing like 12 fetch lands and Death and Taxes or something.
Does Death and Taxes want to draw cards like this?
Yeah, I guess
that's the question, right? If you do, I think this would be great, but what if they just like fetch and then kill you because you played this thing and you're not hindering them in any way, right? What you do is you drew more mana dorks or whatever in your hand, right? That's the question. But if you want to draw cards, like, I think this could be good.
Yeah, it might not be good enough. I think people might try it in Legacy, but whether or not it actually sticks, I'm not sure. I also love how this interacts with like Field of Ruin and other stuff that forces your opponents to search. Like, crack a Field of Ruin, everyone has to search. You draw 3 and you get your land back because of Field of Ruin.
Wait a minute. Interesting.
Yeah, or like Scheming Symmetry, like you get to draw a card and you get to set up the top of your
I
deck.
don't know if I want to ramp the table.
I don't know how to ramp the table to draw 2 cards.
Well, you don't ramp them though because you kill a land, so they break
your
even
other
on
2
lands.
opponents. Oh, you're talking about one.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Two opponents would get to ramp. That's true. One of them wouldn't, and then 2 of them would.
Yeah, we don't want any of them to ramp.
Can you imagine if this was a human?
Oh, that would be be
If this
so
were
strong.
a human, it would be a little bit better. I would rank it higher if it were a human.
Its creature types are pretty useless.
That's Cleric.
Like, Halfling doesn't have support. Cleric, I guess. I don't know if I've ever seen someone play a Cleric deck, but there you can play a Cleric deck in Commander. It would be way stronger as a human, though. I think I just play this in every white deck. Like, for now, until proven otherwise, I think this is the Esper Sentinel of the set, where you just, no setup, no anything, you just run it out there, trust that it's going to draw you 2 or 3 cards, and you're thrilled about that for 2 mana in a mono white deck.
Unfortunately, all my decks will continue looking like white weenie decks. It's not my fault. My card draw comes with a 2/2 body, right? Like, I don't know. Like, it's my card draw. What do you want? Speaking of mono white cards, Legion Loyalty, 6 white, enchantment mythic. Creatures you control have Myriad. And remember, Myriad is when a creature with Myriad attacks for each opponent other than defending player. Create a token that's a copy of that creature that's attacking that player or planeswalker they control. Exile the tokens at end of combat.
This card's so much fun.
Yeah.
This is the card I just want to get on the battlefield most. I think out of all the cards we've seen, it's like a big Panharmonicon, Ishin, get a bunch of triggers, like it's just super fun. I think it's probably not very good. Like if you actually just want to kill people, you should just cast like whatever that Chroma's card is from the first
Chroma's
Commander
Memorial?
Legends.
Oh.
Yeah, no, the 4 mana instant double strike protection
Chroma's
from
Will.
everything. Like
No
there's
protection?
much easier ways to actually just kill someone. But if you just want to have a ridiculous turn with a ton of tokens and triggers and just like fun stuff happening, this card's gonna get it done. Like it just seems so much fun to have on the battlefield.
It is a bit beefy on the mana.
8 mana, yes, it is.
Like obviously it'd be too broken if it had like Convoke, but like yeah, like eight mana is a bit beefy. I don't know. Is it just me? But like this whole set, after they showed me Elder Brain, the only thing that's had me really excited was Tasha. But like this feels kind of
I will say I think the mana cost is kind of fair. Just because if you look at what it costs to Myriad a single creature, like Blade of Selves is 2 to cast, 4 to equip. We got a new legend that's 6 mana that gives 1 creature Myriad in haste. So based on how much Wizards values Myriad, 8 mana to give everything Myriad all the time is probably a fair price. At the same time, 8 mana though, you're gonna have a lot of games where this is stuck in your hand, or the nightmare is you got this, you're at 7 mana, you're like waiting to make the land drop the next turn and play this, and your opponent like Wrath of Gods the turn before, and then you just like play this on an empty board and cry yourself to sleep and pass the turn. Like, I don't think it's good. I don't know, am I wrong, Richard? Could this card actually be good, or is this just like a weird, huge, fun card?
This is a
horrendous as your finisher. No, like you have to have a full board of ETBs. Or like a lethal board. And remember, like your commander just dies, right? Like, so you need to not Myriad your commander, or like you're only using it for ETBs, right? Like the creatures don't hit.
Yep.
Unless you mirror box or something. Like, I don't know. It's kind of janky. Like, I think the best case is like you have all these ETB triggers or damage triggers. You play this, you get all this value, and then you refill your hand to do something else. But I don't know. It's like 8 mana. And I feel this needs to be Boros or something. Like you have to play in a deck that like can really attack if you want the combat to actually work. Otherwise, it's just like, why don't you just play like Eerie Interlude? Blink all your creatures for like 3, get all your ETBs and call it a day, right? Like,
yeah, no, that is true. I mean, some decks can cheat into play. Like Gen is good at reanimating enchantments. That kind of helps. Yeah. Like. Maybe if you build around it in the right way or reanimate it or something to get it into play a little bit cheaper. I love the idea of having it on the battlefield in Ishin, because Myriad will double trigger, and then you got, oh my god, you're gonna have all kinds of creatures doing all kinds of things. So there are ways that it can be really, really spicy, but 8 mana is just so much. But at the same time, if this was 4 mana or something, I think it would just be busted and unfun. So like, I think they had to make it unplayably expensive to make it like somewhat safe, but now that it's so expensive, it's going to be hard for most decks to make use of it, I think.
All right. So that's all the time we have for spoilers. So you can check them all out at mtgpreviews.com. We have a ton of Baldur's Gate. Remember, there is a draftable set and then also some precons coming up. So there's a ton of cards for Baldur's Gate.
Anyway, I think, do we have any time to squeeze in a fish mail, Richard? Maybe just one, a quick one.
All right. We'll squeeze in a fish mail. We'll see. Surely nothing controversial has happened this week that we need to comment on. All right. This is an interesting one. T Laser. Is WotC silently taking over the RC? RC says no Planeswalker as commanders. WotC says X can be your commander. RC says legendary permanents can't be your commanders. WotC says choose a background. Or X can be your commander. Shurikai. What do you make of this ongoing battle between WotC and the RC?
I mean, when it comes down to it, Wizards wins, right? Because they get to print the cards. So no matter
RC
what, like
wins. They can ban them all if they had. If they took the hard line stance, so like all background cards banned.
Oh wow!
But they would never do that,
wish,
right? But they could.
No, they wouldn't. I wish they would, just to see what Twitter was like that day. That would be an entertaining day on MTG Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I really don't know. Like, I think my take is still that Wizards and the RC have a pretty good working relationship, and that I'm sure they don't agree with everything that each other does, but I think in general they're pretty connected, and I wouldn't be surprised if the RC knew about backgrounds before, when Wizards was designing them, or Wizards ran it by them. We're like, hey, like, is this going to be all right? And then they got the sign off. So that's how I view it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my perception from the outside, is they kind of work hand in hand for the most part.
I think the RC is irrelevant at this point. I think Wizards just does whatever, and there's no way the RC will ever do anything dramatic. I guess the most dramatic thing was Lutri, like a single card pre-banned, but I can't imagine them just banning an entire mechanic, or like preemptively banning Tasha. But I could see if you're like some commander purist, like you'd be aghast at what Wizards is doing, right? Like the commander format has changed a lot in the past couple of years. So the RC needs to be up with the times, up with what R&D is doing for Wizards. Otherwise, it's not going to be this conflict all the time. And to be fair, I think when RC says no this, I think they mean as a blanket. So like, having one or two Planeswalkers commanders is like not that bad, but they don't want every Planeswalker as a commander. But there's a lot of background cards, so I don't know.
Well, we'll see if Wizards prints a legend that's like, you can play hybrid mana even if it's outside your color identity. Then we'll know that the battle's really on between Marrow and Wizards and the RC.
What if they print a card? You can play cards named Primeval Titan in your deck.
Oh, that would be so funny. I mean, I don't think they would actually do anything like that, but
so they would essentially be conjuring something off the ban list. Got it.
Yeah, actually, I want to see them print a Power Crept Primetime, like 5 mana Primetime, and I want to see what EDA, what the RC committee does in response to that. Whether they ban the new one or unban Primetime. Okay, so that's our one question for the week. We'll be back to more questions when we're outside of preview season and don't have so much to cover. So thank you to everyone who sent them in. If you have more questions in the future, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 382 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. Richard Cribb, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we'll be back next week to talk more Commander Legends too, and whatever else goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have a great week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.